Hello and welcome to part 2 of this tutorial on creating a side-scrolling game with GameMaker Studio. This is Dominic for CreateIndieGames.com, and in this video we are going to do some GML scripting to generate clouds on top of the trees. But before we do that, we need to add the sprites to our project, so go to Sprites, Create Sprite, Load Sprite, and click on the cloud and name the sprite SPR_cloud. Then go to Objects, Create Object, name it obj_cloud, and of course select the cloud sprite. Now one more thing, I would like to change the origin of the cloud sprite. I would like to leave X at 0, but I would like to set Y to 64. The situation at the moment is that the trees leaving the screen on the left side will be repositioned at the right side of the screen and then scroll back into view. So we're basically seeing the same 3 trees again and again. The next thing we should do is randomize the height of the trees. Since we set the origin of the tree sprites to the top of the tree and the trees are being cut off at the bottom of the screen, the position of a tree determines its size. So to get trees of random heights, we just need to place them at random positions. Now that would be easy enough to do by just opening the tree object and opening the script there, and then just setting Y to random size like this. Y becomes random room height, and then the trees would have a random position. But you will soon see there's a little problem with that. Some trees will end up hanging in the air, and there won't be enough space for either the birds or some clouds. So we need something like a more advanced strategy here. What we would like to have is a tree at the bottom, a gap of a predetermined size, and then some clouds at the top. For now, let's assume that the gap size is fixed. Then we can vary the tree's height by pushing this whole unit here up or down. But it would be nice if we could ensure that there's at least one cloud visible at the top of the screen and at least the green treetop visible at the bottom. So we have to keep the random position within certain bounds. The dark gray bar here represents the height of the screen, and the pink bar is the gap we'd like to leave between the treetop and the clouds. The medium gray rectangles each represent the size of one sprite, that is the minimum space we'd like to leave for a cloud or a treetop. The purple area then becomes the leeway we have for pushing this whole unit here up or down. The leeway then becomes the room height minus 2 times the sprite size minus gap. Middle Y represents the middle of the screen, which can be calculated as room height divided by 2. And the offset is going to be random range between minus leeway half and plus leeway half. We then add the offset to the middle to get the situation on the right of the screen here. And now that we've got this new middle here, we can use that to calculate the position of the bottom of the clouds and the position of the top of the trees. So treetop is the middle plus half the gap here, and the bottom of the clouds can be calculated as middle minus half the gap. So let's start scripting. We will first start by introducing the variables we need for the calculations. So I'm going to add gap, leeway, offset, middle Y, treetop, cloud bottom, and let me enlarge this window a little bit so you can see a little bit better. And through experimentation, I found that a good value for gap is 160. You can change this later if you want to make the game a little bit harder to play. You can pull it down to around 100 maybe. but I found 160 a good value to start with. And leeway is room height minus 2 times sprite size minus gap. Offset becomes random range minus leeway half and plus leeway half. And middle y then is room height divided by 2 plus offset. And we can then calculate the position of the top of the tree as middle y plus half the gap, and the bottom of the clouds is middle y minus half the gap. And to reposition the tree, we just set y to the treetop we just calculated. And then we also need to generate a cloud. So this can be done with instance create. The X position will be the same as for the tree, but the cloud will be offset a little bit to the right, since we set the center of the cloud to the bottom left, whereas the center of the tree is the middle top. So this will create a cloud, but it would be nice if the cloud also started scrolling. So I'm going to use a with statement here. And then, like in the script before, I'm going to set the horizontal speed to minus scrolling speed to make the cloud scroll to the left. That should do it for creating the cloud, but we should also make sure we destroy it when it's no longer needed. That is, when the cloud leaves the left side of the screen. So open the cloud object, add event, step, end step, and then go to control, code, and click the execute code action and drag it into the actions list. And then just check if x is less than minus sprite size, and if so, destroy the cloud. Instance destroy. That makes sure we free resources when they're no longer needed. So let's give it a try now. And you might realize that basically it's working, but occasionally there might be a huge gap between one tree and the next, and the cloud gets very, very close to the top of the next tree. So we can avoid that by remembering the last position the tree had, and then making sure there's not too much of a gap between one tree and the next. And another thing I'm just noticing is that sometimes the trees are a little bit too low here, right there. So we better change the script a little bit. We should change this 2 here to a 4. And then we should remember the position of the previous tree. Open the room. And then go to settings and click on creation code. And here we're going to introduce a global variable called previous offset. So write global dot previous offset equals 0. And this code is being run before any of the instances are created. And then we can just go back to our script in the tree, and let's introduce a new variable here called max offset delta, and we will use this to restrict the difference between two trees. So adjust the offset to make sure it is never more than max offset delta. And I found that a good starting point for this is setting max offset delta to the size of the gap. And then we can use the median function to make sure it stays between previous offset minus max offset delta offset and global previous offset plus max offset delta. And then we have to remember this offset for the next tree. Let's try it again. And now there shouldn't be too much of a gap between one tree and the next. So this is just enough to fly through it. Of course, we do not have any collision detection yet. We're going to add that later. But the trees are looking good and the clouds are looking good too. Next, I would like to fill up the space above a cloud with more clouds. We are going to use a for loop to do that. So we can leave this calculation of the cloud bottom here, and while cloud bottom is larger than 0, we subtract sprite size from it. And then we can just pull this code here into the for loop, and that will create more clouds above the first one and fill up the entire space between the first cloud and the top of the screen. But I would like to break things up a little bit and make them a little bit more random. So I'm going to introduce a new variable called createCloud. Create_cloud. And for the first cloud, I will set that one to 0 to start with, to 1 to start with. And then I will only create a cloud if createCloud is greater than 0.5. So the first cloud always gets created because we start with a value of 1. But for the next iteration of the for loop, we are going to set this to a new random value. So createCloud becomes random1, and this will determine if the next cloud gets created or not. And it would also be nice to have to fill the space between clouds. So I would like to create some more clouds on the right of each cloud. And I would also like to offset it by half a sprite size. So if random1 is greater than 0.5, create another cloud right next to it in the empty space between trees. And we can just copy this code and paste it, and that's then set x to x plus sprite size and cloud bottom to cloud bottom minus sprite size divided by 2. And that's it for this part of the tutorial. Oops, there's a typo. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next tutorial.